Coming up, this week saw the latest chapter in Nigel Farage's never-ending quest to be the most controversial man in British politics. Farage has decided to double down on cosying up to Donald Trump, and by extension Vladimir Putin, whilst turning against Ukraine and criticising its president Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Farage, the man most responsible for a Brexit avidly welcomed by Putin's Russia and which has weakened Britain on the global stage, that same Farage is now overtly siding with Putin over Zelenskyy, a democratically elected leader fighting for his country's survival. Stay tuned. Earlier this week, President Bone Spurs and his sofa-loving sidekick JD Vance ambushed and attempted to bully President Zelenskyy during his visit to the White House. Now, if you're a decent human being with even a shred of moral clarity, your reaction to this should be outrage. Zelenskyy is the leader of a nation that's been invaded by its imperial neighbour, Russia, an authoritarian regime that's committed war crimes on an industrial scale. But Nigel Farage is not a decent human being. He is amoral. He's calculated that his best chance of political success lies with aligning himself with the increasingly fascistic Trump team in the White House by blaming Zelenskyy for the disastrous meeting held there a few days ago. According to Farage, Zelenskyy was rude to Trump, saying that he bowled in and showed no respect to Trump in his own house. Take a look.
All right, if Zelenskyy wants to bowl in and show no respect to a man who we all know is incredibly old-fashioned about this stuff, and he really
When
is.
you say this stuff, you mean manners, dress,
very
shoes?
much so. Very
so your
much.
shoes have to be shined. It's like being back at school.
Lots of times, Trump said, yeah, good shoes, great shoes, whatever, That's how he... So if you're going in with a positive mindset, maybe Zelenskyy should have thought about that. But that's minor. That's mine.
So you are critical of him wearing his battle fatigues, effectively?
I think there are times to wear it and there are times not.
Nigel Farage is a man who built his entire career on being as rude as humanly possible to and about the European Union. Yet he suddenly cares about politeness, claiming it was Zelenskyy's attitude that was the main reason why the meeting with Trump descended into a slanging match. Closer to home, in the UK Parliament, Farage and his small band of misfits are shunned by all. There are very rare occasions in history where the House of Commons truly unites against a common enemy, despised on all sides of the chamber. But that's what happened this week when MPs across all the other parties, in government and in opposition, suddenly all turned on, yes, Vladimir Putin, but also Nigel Farage. There was an otherwise quite incredible show of unity in support of President Zelenskyy in Ukraine. Even bad enough's Tories were queuing up to praise Keir Starmer's leadership on the Ukraine versus Trump issue. When Starmer sat down after his big speech on Monday, rather than being challenged and facing criticism from the opposition parties, most of the interventions were from MPs on all sides, other than Reform UK Party Limited, eager to be seen as being right there, supporting our Prime Minister. Kemi Badenoch even declared it was time to discuss where we do agree. For her questions, the Conservative leader asked if he would go further and use Russian-seized assets and advocated for Ukraine to be included in all future negotiations. Ed Davey said he was horrified by the scenes at the Oval Office and talked about reducing our dependency on the US for security. Both interventions were fully compliant with Starmer's strategy. Of course, there was justifiable criticism from the government's own benches about cuts to the aid budget to pay for an increase in spending on defence, and I agree wholeheartedly that this policy shift is not just morally reprehensible, but will prove to be a stupid mistake for this country's security in the long term. But despite this opportunity to challenge the Labour leadership, even Tory wannabe leaders James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat were heaping praise on Starmer. It was just one big House of Commons loving up to that point. And then Nigel Farage stood up. Bear in mind, this was after the radio phone-in that the Reform UK Party Limited's principal shareholder had done earlier that day, and which we saw a clip of earlier, and which had annoyed even most Reform voters, the majority of whom back Zelenskyy over Putin, and the majority of whom now view Trump disfavourably. Farage asked whether, and how many, British troops would be needed in Ukraine.
Does it mean that we need to send British troops? And if we do, Given the size of our army, how many?
Starmer then said this.
Can I just remind him, Russia is the aggressor. Zelensky is a war leader whose country has been invaded. And we should all be supporting him and not fawning over Putin.
A massive cry of hear, hear went up from every MP in the chamber other than the Reform MPs present. During Farage's entire political career, it's always been about what's best for Farage, not what's best for the country or for those voting for him and his current political vehicle. And what's best for the Truth to Power channel is if you'd be kind enough to give this video a like, share a link with your friends and check you're subscribed. For those of you that would like early access to my weekly videos, priority responses to your comments, or even if you'd just like to help me cover the costs of making these videos, then please consider joining the channel as a member. I'll leave a link below giving further details of the perks and membership options. Farage is positioning himself as Trump's chief cheerleader in Britain, even if it means throwing Ukraine under the bus. But this isn't just a one-off. Farage has a long history of siding with authoritarian figures over democratic leaders, famously calling Putin the world leader he most admired. He also praises Trump's strength and leadership, while the rest of us watch in horror as Trump cozies up to dictators and undermines NATO. Farage's latest comments are a part of his ongoing love affair with strongmen who thrive on division, lies, and the erosion of democracy. And talking of lies, remember how Brexit was supposed to make us stronger, more independent, and more influential on the world stage? Well, we can all see how well that's worked out. The UK's global relevance has taken a nosedive. Any influence we ever had with the USA is diminished, and our economy is still reeling from the Brexit fallout. And in this context, Farage is out there this week claiming that Sir Keir Starmer's leadership on Ukraine is thanks to Brexit.
Do you know what's really happened over the last few days?
Tell me.
Is we've actually seen a British Prime Minister viscerally opposed to Brexit, wanting to have a second referendum, now benefiting as Prime Minister enormously from Brexit.
Even for Farage, this is really rich. The idea that Brexit has somehow strengthened Britain's role in supporting Ukraine is laughable. Quite the contrary, Brexit has weakened our position. The UK has always fancied itself as a bridge between Europe and the United States, but that bridge was shown to be structurally unsound this week, as the apparent success of Starmer's love-in with Trump the previous week proving meaningless, with Trump resisting the UK's calls to provide a military security backstop for Ukraine as part of any peace deal. Meanwhile, leaders like Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen are taking the lead on European rearmament and peacekeeping efforts every bit as much as Starmer, if not more, with Macron offering to share the truly independent French nuclear deterrent with the rest of Europe. But sure, Nige, do continue in your struggle to convince us of a single, mythical and long-awaited Brexit benefit. What's really worrying about all of this goes far beyond Farage. He's just a useful idiot serving a broader trend on the hard right wing of Western democracies to undermine democratic institutions and align themselves with authoritarian leaders. Whether it's Trump in the US, Putin in Russia, or Orban in Hungary, the global right-wing playbook is the same. Sow division, spread disinformation, and weaken the institutions that hold power to account. And Farage is right there in the thick of it, doing his part to normalise this toxic ideology. Right on brand for the man who campaigned for Brexit by stoking fears about immigration and lying about the NHS. The same Nigel Farage who spent years peddling conspiracy theories and undermining trust in democratic institutions, both in the UK and in Brussels. And now he's using his platform to attack a war leader who's fighting for his country's very survival. It's despicable, but it's also entirely predictable for Farage, this most amoral of politicians.